Try mocking me again. Noah Carter set the wine bottle down hard enough to rattle every glass on the table, leaned in until his shadow fell across Victoria Ashford's plate, and said it again slower, so all 40 billionaires in the room could hear every word. I said try mocking me again. The billionaire froze. Her smile cracked. The fork slipped out of her fingers and hit the china with a sound like a gunshot in the silence. Because 30 seconds ago, Victoria Ashford, CEO of a company worth $11 billion, had laughed in this waiter's face and asked if his little girl was ashamed of him. And now the waiter was standing over her, and something in his voice had turned the whole room to ice. You built nothing, Noah said quietly. Every dollar you have, you're standing on top of something I made. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to prove it in front of the entire world. Here's the twist that even Victoria didn't see coming. The man in the cheap uniform holding her wine wasn't a waiter at all. He was the ghost of the empire she'd stolen, and he'd just found out her billion-dollar launch was 6 weeks from destroying her. Before we go further, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels tonight. And if you believe dignity is the one thing money can never buy, subscribe and stay with me all the way to the end. Because you are not going to believe how this billionaire falls. The dinner had been going for 2 hours before Victoria Ashford decided the waiter was the most interesting thing in the room. She hadn't planned it that way. The Fairmont Olympics Grand Ballroom held 40 guests that night, hand-picked, each one worth more than most towns in America. Her chief financial officer sat to her left. 2 venture partners from Silicon Valley sat across from her. A senator's aide hovered near the far end of the table, pretending he wasn't taking notes. This was Victoria's dinner, her guest list, her theater. And she had run out of things to say to the people she'd invited. So she watched the man in the black vest. He was older than the other servers, that was the first thing. Most of the staff at the Fairmont looked like they'd been assembled in a lab, young, symmetrical, forgettable. This one had gray coming in at the temples and lines around his eyes that said he'd earned every one of them. He moved differently, too. Not rushed, not nervous. He set down plates like a man who'd decided long ago that no task was beneath doing well. That, more than anything, irritated her. You, she said when he came around with the second bottle of Bordeaux. What's your name? Noah, ma'am. Noah. She rolled it around like she was tasting it. How long have you worked here, Noah? 6 years at this property, longer in the industry. Longer in the industry, she repeated, and a few of the guests smiled because they knew that tone. It was the tone she used in board meetings right before she fired someone. So this is a career for you, not a stopgap. Not something you're doing while you figure out your life. This is the life. Noah finished pouring the CFO's glass. It pays the bills, ma'am. Does it? She leaned back. Because I look at you and I think, God, that man is what, 45 and he's still carrying bottles. Somewhere along the line, something didn't work out. A business maybe. A marriage. Something. The table had gone quiet in that particular way rooms go quiet when the powerful person starts hunting. Nobody wanted to be next. Everybody wanted to watch. 41, Noah said. 41. Victoria smiled. And do you have family? Noah, a wife, kids, a daughter. A daughter. She said it like it delighted her. And how old is your daughter? 10. 10. Victoria set down her glass and folded her hands under her chin, and every person at that table understood that whatever came next was going to be cruel, and every single one of them leaned in anyway. Let me ask you something, Noah, and be honest with me, because I value honesty above almost everything. When your 10-year-old daughter tells her friends at school what her father does for a living, when they ask her, "Hey, what's your dad do?" What does she say? Does she say, "My dad serves rich people their wine"? Does she say that with her chin up? Or does she look at the floor a little? Someone at the table exhaled. The senator's aide put down his fork. Noah didn't move. He held the bottle against his forearm, the way a man holds something he doesn't want to drop, and he looked at Victoria Ashford, 47 years old, worth $11 billion. The woman Forbes had put on its cover 3 times in 5 years, and he did not blink. My daughter, he said, knows exactly what her father does, and she's not ashamed of a single second of it. Of course she isn't. Victoria's voice went soft, almost tender, which was worse. Children are loyal. They forgive us for everything, don't they? They forgive us for being poor, for being tired, for being small. But she'll grow up, Noah. And one day, she'll walk into a building like the one I run, and she'll see what a life actually looks like when someone reaches for it, and she'll come home, and she'll look at you differently. They always do. She picked her glass back up. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to help you see reality. There are people who build things in this world, and there are people who serve the people who build things. You've made your peace with which one you are. I just wanted to hear you say it out loud. The ballroom was silent now. Even the string trio in the corner had stopped between songs. 40 of the wealthiest people in the Pacific Northwest were watching a billionaire dismantle a waiter, and the terrible thing. The thing none of them would admit later was that it was entertaining. Noah set the bottle down on the tray stand, slowly, deliberately. He straightened the napkin over his arm, and when he spoke his voice didn't rise, it dropped so that everyone had to lean in to catch it. You can mock me tonight, Ms. Ashford. The pause stretched. But tomorrow, your company may wish you'd listened. For 1 second, one single second, something flickered across Victoria Ashford's face. Not fear. She didn't do fear. But attention. The way a predator's ears turn at a sound it can't quite place. Then she laughed. Bright, easy, dismissive. Oh, that's marvelous. That's genuinely marvelous. Your company may wish you'd listened. She turned to her CFO. Did you get that, Harold? Write it down. I want it embroidered on a pillow. The table exhaled into laughter, grateful for permission. You're a poet, Noah. Truly. Now more wine. The Napa this time. And do smile. It's a party. Noah nodded once. Right away, ma'am. He turned and walked toward the service door, and if anyone had been watching closely, but nobody was, they'd already moved on. They'd have seen that his hands weren't shaking. Not even a little. In the kitchen, the head server, a wiry man named Dev, who'd worked the Fairmont floor for 19 years, caught Noah by the elbow. What was that? What was what? Table 1 just went dead silent for 30 seconds. I could hear it from here. What did she say to you? Noah pulled a fresh bottle from the rack and checked the label. She asked if my daughter was embarrassed by me. Jesus, Dev winced. And you said? I said no. That's all. Noah looked at him. I told her that tomorrow her company might wish she'd listened tonight. Dev stared. Then he laughed uneasy. Man, you can't say stuff like that to Victoria Ashford. You know who that is. That woman gets people fired for looking at her wrong. She once had a valet let go because he scratched her car door. Didn't even scratch it. She just thought he did. You've got a kid at home. You can't be picking fights with billionaires over dinner. I didn't pick a fight, Noah said. I answered a question. He pushed back out through her, before Dev could argue back into the warm gold light and the low hum of powerful people talking about themselves, and he refilled every glass at that table without spilling a drop. And Victoria Ashford didn't look at him again for the rest of the night, but he looked at her. Once. When she was mid-sentence laughing at something the CFO had said, her whole face lit up with the particular joy of a person who has never in her adult life been told no. And Noah Carter thought, you don't remember me. Of course you don't. But I remember you. I remember all of it. He got home a little after midnight. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms in a building in the central district where the radiators clanked and the neighbors' arguments came through the walls like weather. He let himself in quietly, hung his coat, and stood in the dark, listening. From the hallway, he could hear the babysitter's TV murmuring low. Hey, Renata, he whispered, coming into the living room. Sorry I'm late. Big table ran long. The girl, 19, from the 3rd floor, uncurled from the couch and gathered her things. It's fine. She went down around 9. She fought it, though. Wanted to wait up for you. She always does. He pressed some folded bills into her hand. Homework done. Math and the reading. She said the science thing isn't due till Thursday. Renata paused at the door. She's a good kid, Noah. She told me tonight she's going to buy you a boat someday, so you don't have to work anymore. Noah smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd worn in hours. A boat, huh? A big one, with a hot tub. Of course. Good night, Renata. When she was gone, he went down the hall and eased open Emma's door. She was asleep sideways, one arm flung off the bed, her science folder open on the floor where it had slid. He picked it up, set it on the desk, and stood there a moment, just watching her breathe. 10 years old. His whole life fit inside this room. She stirred. Dad. Hey, go back to sleep, sweetheart. Was it a good night? Her voice was thick and soft. Did you get good tips? The best. He lied gently. Sleep. Love you. Love you more. Always more. He closed her door and stood in the dark hallway and let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding since the ballroom. Then he went to the closet. At the back behind the winter coats and a broken lamp he kept meaning to fix, there was a plastic storage bin. He pulled it down, sat on the edge of his bed and opened it. Inside were the things he never showed anyone. Old photographs, a wedding ring on a chain, and underneath in a manila envelope soft, with handling a stack of documents 15 years old. He didn't need to read them. He knew them by heart. But he took the top page out anyway and held it under the lamp. Certificate of Formation, Meridian Logistics Systems, Inc., Co-founders, Daniel Okafor, Noah Carter. And below that, in the section that made his jaw tighten every single time, Chief Architect N. Carter. He set the page down and picked up the next one. A patent filing. His name on it. The core routing algorithm. The thing that let a shipping network reroute itself in real time when a port shut down, or a truck broke down, or a storm ate 3 days off a delivery window. It had been his idea. His nights. His years. He'd sketched the first version of it on a napkin in a diner in Tacoma when Emma wasn't even a thought yet, when his wife Sarah was still alive and used to bring him coffee at 3 a.m. and say, "You're going to change how the whole world moves, things aren't you?" And he had. He just never got to keep it. The thing. People didn't understand about Noah Carter. The thing Victoria Ashford couldn't have guessed in 100 years was that he had once been the smartest man in every room he walked into. Meridian Logistics Systems. Founded when he was 24 with his best friend Daniel. 2 guys with a garage, a whiteboard, and a piece of software that did something nobody else's software could do. Within 4 years, they had contracts with 3 of the biggest freight companies in the country. Within 6, they had a valuation that made the local paper run a story with the headline, "Seattle's Quiet Billionaires in Waiting." And then, it all came apart, the way things come apart, not all at once, but in a single phone call. Sarah's diagnosis. Stage 3. Aggressive. Noah had insurance, but the treatment Sarah needed was experimental out-of-network, and the numbers involved were the kind that made the insurance company's representatives go quiet on the phone. He needed cash. Real cash. Fast. Daniel had wanted to hold the line. "We're 18 months from a payday that changes everything," he'd said. Sarah's a fighter. "We refinance, we take a bridge loan, we do whatever we have to, but you do not sell your shares. You built this. This is yours." But 18 months was time Noah didn't have. And a bridge loan was a maybe. And Sarah was a certainty. A real breathing, terrified certainty, sitting in a chair in an oncologist's office, holding his hand and telling him she was scared. So he sold. He sold his founder's stake in Meridian Logistics Systems, the company he'd built with his own hands. The algorithm that was his life's work, to a private equity group for a fraction of what it was worth. Cents on the dollar. Enough to pay for Sarah's treatment. Enough later when the treatment didn't work, and she died anyway, to bury her with dignity. And enough 3 years after that when Emma was born and needed emergency surgery at 8 months old, a hole in her heart. The doctors caught just in time to save his daughter's life without a second thought. He never regretted it. Not once. Not for a single second. But here was the part that sat in his chest like a stone. The private equity group that bought his shares sat on the technology for 2 years, then sold it, bundled with other assets to a rising firm run by an ambitious young executive named Victoria Ashford. Ashford Technologies had built its entire logistics division, the division that made it a household name. The division that put Victoria on the cover of Forbes, on top of the routing algorithm, Noah Carter, designed on a napkin in a diner in Tacoma. She didn't know his name. Why would she? It was 3 layers of paperwork and a decade removed from a signature on a document she'd probably never read. To her, the technology had always simply existed, a thing she'd acquired, a tool that made her rich. She had no idea. The man who invented it had refilled her wine glass 4 times tonight and thanked her for the privilege. Noah put the documents back in the envelope, and the envelope back in the bin, and the bin back on the shelf. He turned off the lamp. He hadn't been bluffing at that dinner. He wanted to be clear about that, at least to himself, lying there in the dark. When he'd said, "Tomorrow, your company may wish you'd listened," it hadn't been the empty threat of a humiliated man. It had been something else. Because 2 weeks ago, a former colleague from the Meridian days, a woman named Priya, who still worked in the industry, had called him out of the blue. "Noah, you still keep up with the old system, the core routing engine." "I try not to think about it honestly." "Yeah, well, you might want to start." Her voice had been tight. "Ashford's about to launch a new platform. Global. Huge. Biggest product launch they've ever done. They've got half the Fortune 500 signed up to migrate their whole supply chains onto it. Launches in 6 weeks. Good for them. Noah, it's built on your engine, the old core. And they modified it. They scaled it up for real-time global routing way past anything we ever designed it for. And I've seen the specs." A pause. "It's going to fail." He'd sat down slowly. "What do you mean fail?" "I mean the load balancing breaks down past a certain threshold. There's a cascade condition in the rerouting logic. You'd know exactly what I'm talking about. You're the one who flagged it back in the day. Remember, you put a hard cap on concurrent reroutes because past that number, the whole system starts eating itself. They took the cap out, Noah. They took it out to hit their scale numbers for the demo. It'll run fine in a controlled launch. And then the first time there's a real disruption, a port strike, a weather event, anything that triggers mass rerouting across the network, it's going to collapse. And it won't just collapse quietly. It'll take every supply chain running on it down with it. We're talking hospitals not getting supplies, grocery distribution, pharmaceutical cold chains. It's going to hurt people, Noah, real people." He'd been quiet a long time. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I flagged it internally, and I got shut down. And I got shut down hard in a way that made me understand that this launch is happening no matter what, because too much money is riding on it, and Ashford has personally staked her reputation on the date. And you're the only person left alive who understands that engine better than I do. If anyone can prove what's wrong with it in a way that can't be waved away." She'd stopped. "I don't know what I'm asking you to do. I just couldn't sit on it and not tell you." That had been 2 weeks ago. And tonight, of all the tables at the Fairmont on the one night he'd been assigned to the grand ballroom, the woman sitting at the head of it, the woman about to launch a broken machine into the arteries of the American economy, had looked at him over a glass of Bordeaux and asked if his daughter was ashamed of him. Noah lay in the dark and thought, sometimes the universe isn't subtle. He didn't sleep much. Emma Carter was by any measure an unusual 10-year-old. She was the kind of kid who asked questions grown-ups didn't have answers to. At the breakfast table the next morning over cereal, with her hair still a disaster from sleep, she looked up at her father and said, "Dad, is it true that some people are more important than other people?" Noah set down the coffee pot. "Where'd that come from?" Bailey Krause said her dad says some people just matter more, because they have more money and they do bigger things. And she said, Emma poked at her cereal. She said that means people like waiters and janitors and stuff aren't as important. And I said that wasn't true, and she said it was, and everybody kind of laughed. She looked up. "You're a waiter." "I am." "So does that mean you're not as important?" Noah pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. This was the thing about being Emma's father, you couldn't fake it with her. She'd know. She always knew. "Let me ask you something," he said. "When your grandma was sick, remember 2 years ago, when she was in the hospital?" "Yeah." "Who took care of her? Who brought her food and changed her sheets and helped her walk to the bathroom and sat with her when she was scared at 3 in the morning?" Emma thought. The nurses. And the aide guy. Marcus. She liked Marcus. Marcus. Right. Now the man who owns that hospital. The one whose name is on the building. Did he ever come sit with your grandma at 3 in the morning? Emma almost laughed. No. So who mattered more to your grandma in the moment she needed someone? The man whose name is on the building, or Marcus who held her hand? Emma was quiet. Then slowly, Marcus. There you go. Noah reached across and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. Here's the truth, and I need you to really hear it because a lot of people are going to spend your whole life trying to convince you it's not true. Nobody is more important than anybody else. Not the CEO, not the janitor, not the president, not the guy who cleans the president's office. Some people have more money. Some people have more power. But money and power aren't the same thing as worth. A person's worth isn't something you can buy, and it isn't something anybody can take away from you. It's just yours. You were born with it. You'll die with it. And in between, the only person who can ever really lose it for you is you. By the way you choose to treat people. He tapped the table. You understand? Emma nodded slowly. Then she said, So what do I tell Bailey Krause? Noah grinned. Tell Bailey Krause that her dad's the one who taught her to look down on people, and someday she's gonna have to unlearn it, and it's gonna be a lot harder for her than it is for you. Emma grinned back. Can I say that exactly? Maybe soften it a little. She laughed, and the laugh went straight into his chest, and for a moment, the ballroom and the algorithm and the storm he could feel coming all fell away, and there was just this, his daughter laughing at the breakfast table, worth more to him than every dollar in Victoria Ashford's empire. He walked her to school. He always walked her to school. And when she disappeared through the doors with her too big backpack, he stood on the sidewalk a moment longer than he needed to, and then he took out his phone and called Priya. It's Noah, he said. I want to see the specs, all of them. I want to see exactly what they did to the engine. There was a pause on the line. You sure? Because once you look, you can't unlook. And these people don't play. Noah watched the school doors. I met her last night, Ashford. She was at a dinner I worked. She didn't know who I was. You're kidding. She asked if my daughter was embarrassed to have a waiter for a father. Priya let out a slow breath. Oh, Noah. Send me the specs, Priya. Send me everything. The specs came that afternoon, encrypted to an email account Noah hadn't used in years. He waited until Emma was in bed. Then he sat at the little desk in the corner of the living room, opened the files, and began to read. And within 20 minutes, the years fell away. It was strange and a little frightening how fast it came back. 15 years of pouring wine and carrying trays and helping with fourth-grade math. And the moment he looked at that architecture, he was himself again, the man who'd built this, the man who understood it in his bones. He read the rerouting logic, and he could see it running in his mind like a film. He could see where the water flowed, and where it would pool, and where under enough pressure the whole structure would crack. And Priya was right. God, she was right. They'd taken the cap off. The concurrency limit, the one hard, ugly, non-negotiable rule he'd built into the original engine, because he'd tested it, because he'd watched it fail in a lab, and knew exactly what failure looked like. They'd removed it to hit their scale numbers. Somebody had made a decision somewhere up the chain that the risk was theoretical and the deadline was real. He knew who that somebody was. He read until 3 a.m. He filled a legal pad with notes. And when he finally sat back, he understood two things with total clarity. The first was that Ashford Technologies' new global platform was going to fail catastrophically. The first time the real world put real stress on it. And when it did, it was going to hurt an enormous number of people who had never heard of Victoria Ashford and never chosen to trust her with their medicine and their food. The second was that he was the only person alive with both the knowledge to prove it and no corporate leash to stop him from doing so. He looked at the framed photo on the desk, Sarah holding a newborn Emma, both of them so small and so alive. He'd made a promise at Sarah's grave. He'd promised he'd raise their daughter to be a person of substance, to be brave when it was hard, to do the right thing even when the wrong thing was easier and safer and paid better. What kind of father tells his kid that he thought, and then looks the other way, when he's the only one who can stop something terrible? He picked up his phone one more time. It was 3 a.m., but he wasn't going to sleep anyway. He drafted an email, professional, precise, unemotional, to Ashford Technologies' General Counsel and their Chief Technology Officer. He identified himself. He laid out the flaw. He attached his original patent documentation, the parts that showed the concurrency cap and why it existed. He explained in language no engineer could dismiss exactly what would happen at launch. He did not threaten. He did not gloat. He simply told the truth and asked them to delay the launch and fix the engine before it hurt someone. He signed it, Noah Carter, Chief Architect, former Meridian Logistics Systems. He read it 4 times, then he sent it. And somewhere across the city, in a glass tower, 40 floors above the streets, she believed she owned a machine in Victoria Ashford's Security Operations Center, flagged an unusual email, cross-referenced a name against 15-year-old acquisition paperwork, and began silently to change everything. The reply did not come from the General Counsel or the CTO. It came 2 days later in the form of a phone call to the Fairmont Olympics HR department. Noah found out when his manager, a decent man named Terrence, who'd never had a problem with him in 6 years, called him into the little office behind the kitchen with a face like a funeral. "Noah, sit down." "What's going on, Terrence?" Terrence didn't sit. He stood behind his desk and rubbed the back of his neck and couldn't quite meet Noah's eyes. "I got a call this morning. From upstairs. Corporate. Somebody very high up got a complaint about you from a very important guest. Ms. Ashford's people. They're saying you were hostile, that you threatened her, that you made political comments and made the whole table uncomfortable." Noah went very still. "That's not what happened." "I know it's not." Terrence finally looked at him. "I know it's not, Noah, because I know you, and I know how these people operate. But the thing is, Ashford Technologies books the grand ballroom 14-15 times a year. Product launches, investor dinners, the whole thing. They are one of this hotel's biggest clients. And when a client like that calls and says this person makes us uncomfortable," he spread his hands helplessly. I don't have the room, man. I'm sorry. I fought for you upstairs, I did. But it's not my call anymore." Noah closed his eyes. "You're firing me." "I'm being told to let you go. There's a difference, but I know it doesn't feel like one." Terrence sat down heavily. "There's a severance. 2 months. I pushed for that at least. And I'll give you the best reference anybody's ever written. But Noah, I gotta ask. What the hell did you do to a woman like Victoria Ashford? Guys like us, we're invisible to people like her. What did you do to end up on her radar?" Noah opened his eyes. And for the first time he understood, really understood what he was up against. He hadn't just insulted a rich woman's pride at a dinner. He'd sent her General Counsel proof that her company's flagship product was broken. And her response, her first response, before she'd even had her engineers verify a word of it, had been to reach out and crush the messenger. To find out where he worked and take it from him. Not because she was worried he was wrong, because she was worried he was right. "Terrence," Noah said quietly, "do you know what she's afraid of?" "What?" "That's the wrong question." He stood up. "The right question is why a woman with $11 billion is afraid of a waiter at all." He picked up his coat off the chair. "I built something a long time ago, and she's about to break it in a way that's going to hurt a lot of people. I told her so, politely, in writing. And this." He gestured at the office, the pink slip on the desk, the whole quiet machinery of his firing. "This is her answer." Terrence stared at him. "Noah, if what you're saying is true, if you've got some kind of proof of something, you need to be careful. You've got a little girl. People like Ashford, they don't just fire you and stop. They finish things. You go up against her, you're gonna find out real fast how it feels when someone with unlimited money decides to make your life a problem." "I know," Noah said. "Then why are you smiling?" Because he was. He hadn't even realized it. "Because," Noah said, pulling on his coat, "for 15 years, I've told my daughter that a person's worth isn't something anybody can take from you. And I've spent 15 years wondering if I actually believed it, or if it was just something a broke waiter tells his kid to make them both feel better." He paused at the door. "I guess I'm about to find out." He shook Terrence's hand. He thanked him and meant it. And then he walked out of the Fairmont Olympic for the last time, into the gray Seattle afternoon, unemployed at 41, with 2 months of severance, and a 10-year-old at home, and a dead wife's photo on his desk, and the entire weight of Victoria Ashford's empire now turning slowly to face him. And he was not afraid. That was the thing he'd remember later, when it got so much worse than this, when the videos started, when the articles came, when they came for his name and his reputation, and even God help them tried to come for Emma. He'd remember standing on that sidewalk in the cold, with nothing left to lose, and realizing that a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous man in the world, to someone who's built her entire life out of things that can be taken away. He took out his phone. He had a voicemail. He almost didn't check it, but he did. It was Priya. Her voice was different this time. Frightened. "Noah, they know. They know I sent you the specs. I just got walked out of the building by security. Someone's coming after me too. And Noah..." A shaky breath. "The email you sent. It went all the way up. To her. Ashford's got a name for you now. And I heard someone in legal say she wants you handled." Those were the words. Handled. "Whatever you're planning, whatever you're going to do." The message cut close to the edge of the recording. "Do it fast, because she's not going to fight fair, and she's not going to fight slow. Watch your back. Watch your daughter. And Noah." The last part came out almost as a whisper. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this, but I'm also really, really glad it's you." The message ended. Noah stood on the sidewalk for a long moment. Cars hissed by on the wet street. Somewhere a bus sighed to a stop, and a woman in a glass tower 40 floors up was at that very moment saying his name out loud to a room full of lawyers and telling them she wanted it erased. He put the phone in his pocket. He had a daughter to pick up from school, and he had a war to win. The picking up of Emma from school that afternoon was the hardest thing Noah had done in years, and he'd done a lot of hard things. He stood at the chain-link fence with the other parents, most of them younger than him, most of them checking phones or chatting about weekend soccer games, and he watched the doors open and the flood of children come pouring out, and he thought about the fact that he no longer had a job, and that a woman worth $11 billion had that very morning said out loud in a room full of lawyers that she wanted him handled. And then Emma came running out with her backpack bouncing and her shoes untied, and her whole face lit up the way it always was when she saw him, and she threw her arms around his waist and said, "Dad, guess what, I got 100 on the science quiz." And Noah crouched down and held his daughter and said, 100. That's my girl. That's my genius girl." And he did not let a single thing show on his face. Not one thing. "Can we get ice cream to celebrate?" "We can get ice cream." They walked to the little place on the corner that they always went to, and Emma got the mint chip she always got, and Noah sat across from her and watched her talk with her mouth full about the science quiz, and about Bailey Krause, and about a boy named Elliot who'd fallen off the monkey bars, and he let himself have this. Just this. 20 minutes of his daughter being 10 years old and happy and safe. Because he knew the way you know when a storm is coming, even before the sky changes, that these 20 minutes were about to become very rare. That night, after she was asleep, he opened his laptop and started to build his case. Not the emotional case. He'd already lost the emotional round at that dinner the moment he opened his mouth. This was the other case, the real one. The one made of documents and dates and technical proof. The one that couldn't be waved away, or laughed off, or spun into a headline. He pulled up the original Meridian filings. He pulled up the patent. He pulled up the specs Priya had sent him, and he began methodically to assemble a timeline that any engineer in the world could follow, from his napkin sketch in a Tacoma diner all the way to the broken machine Victoria Ashford was about to launch. He worked until 2 in the morning. He was good at this. He'd forgotten how good. And at exactly 2:14 a.m., his phone lit up with a number he didn't recognize. He almost let it ring out. But something made him answer. "Mr. Carter." A woman's voice. Smooth, professional, warm in the way that expensive things are warm. "I hope I'm not calling too late. I know it's an odd hour. My name is Diane Foss. I'm senior counsel at Ashford Technologies. I'm calling on behalf of Ms. Ashford herself." Noah's whole body went cold and still. "It's 2 in the morning. "It is, and I apologize. But Ms. Ashford asked me to reach out personally, and when Ms. Ashford asks for something, we tend to move quickly." A soft laugh. "I'll be direct with you, Mr. Carter, because I sense you're a direct man. We received your email, we take it seriously, and Ms. Ashford would like to resolve this matter in a way that's, shall we say, mutually beneficial." "Mutually beneficial," Noah repeated. "I'll put a number on the table since I suspect you'd prefer that to a dance. Ms. Ashford is prepared to offer you a settlement. A significant one. In exchange, you would sign an agreement acknowledging that any claims regarding the Meridian technology were fully and finally resolved at the time of the original sale, and a non-disclosure provision covering all communications past and future regarding Ashford Technologies products." A pause. "The number, Mr. Carter, is $1.2 million. Noah sat in the dark of his living room in an apartment where the radiator clanked and the neighbors argued through the walls. Unemployed, a single father, 41 years old, and someone had just offered him $1.2 million to be quiet. He thought about what $1.2 million would mean. He thought about Emma's college. He thought about a house with a yard. He thought about never again standing at a fence with untied shoe children pouring out and no job to go to. He thought about all of it honestly in the space of about 4 seconds, because he was not a saint and he was not a fool, and he had a daughter to raise. And then he thought about the port strike that was coming, the weather event, the mass rerouting, the hospitals, the medicine, the cold chains, the real people who had never heard the name Victoria Ashford, who were going to trust her machine with their lives because she was going to tell them it worked when she knew that it didn't. "Ms. Foss," Noah said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Does Ms. Ashford know the platform is going to fail?" The pause on the other end was one beat too long. And in that beat, Noah heard everything he needed to hear. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Mr. Carter." "Yeah, you are." He said it gently. "You're a lawyer. You read my email. You saw the technical documentation. You've probably had your own engineers look at it in the last 48 hours, and I'm guessing they came back and told you exactly what I told you, which is why you're calling me at 2 in the morning with $1.2 million instead of a lawsuit for defamation. You don't offer money like that to a man who's wrong. You offer it to a man who's right and inconvenient." He let that sit. "So let me answer your offer. The answer is no. Mr. Carter, the answer is no, and here's why, and I want you to write it down and read it to her exactly the way I say it. You tell Ms. Ashford that I'm not for sale. Tell her I sold the only thing I ever had that was worth money 15 years ago, and I sold it to save my wife's life, and my wife died anyway, and I would sell it all again 100 times over, and there is nothing left in me that has a price." She met a waiter at a dinner and thought she was looking at a man who'd settle. She wasn't. She was looking at a man who already lost the only things that mattered and came out the other side of it, and you cannot threaten a man like that, and you cannot buy him. Tell her that. The silence stretched. "Mr. Carter," Diane Foss said finally, and her voice had changed, dropped the warmth, gone flat and cold. "I want to be very clear with you because I think you may not fully appreciate your situation. You are a former food service employee with a 15-year-old grievance and no institutional support. Ms. Ashford is one of the most powerful people in this country. She has resources you cannot imagine. If you reject this offer, this becomes adversarial. And I have watched adversarial go very badly for people far better positioned than you. You have a daughter. Think about your daughter." And there it was. The turn. The moment the velvet came off, and Noah saw the thing underneath. "Ms. Foss," Noah said, and his voice was very quiet now. "Did you just bring up my daughter?" "I'm simply suggesting." "You brought up my daughter." He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the sleeping city. "I'm going to tell you the same thing I told your boss at that dinner, and I want you to understand, I'm not being dramatic. I mean this as a plain statement of fact. If anything happens to my daughter, if anyone so much as looks at her sideways, there is no amount of money and no number of lawyers on this earth that will keep me from bringing every single thing Victoria Ashford has ever built down to the ground. Do you understand me? I have nothing left to lose. She has everything. That's not a fair fight. That's not even close to a fair fight. And it's not in my favor that it isn't." He took a breath. "Now it's late, and I have to get my daughter up for school in a few hours. Good night, Ms. Foss." He hung up. His hands were shaking. He noticed that with a kind of distant surprise. His voice had been steady the whole time, rock steady, but his hands were shaking, and he pressed them flat against the windowsill until they stopped. He'd just turned down $1.2 million, in the dark, alone, with a sleeping 10-year-old down the hall. He should have felt terror. Instead, he felt something clean and cold and clear, like the first breath of air after you've been underwater too long. He felt for the first time in 15 years entirely himself. He did not sleep all that night. The next morning, the war began in earnest, and it began exactly the way Priya had warned him it would: fast and dirty, and nowhere near fair. It started with a video. Emma found it actually, which was the cruelest part. She was on the couch before school, watching something on her tablet, and she went very quiet, and then she said, "Dad," in a small voice that made his stomach drop before he even crossed the room. Someone had taken footage. Noah never figured out from where security cameras may be, or a guest's phone of that night at the Fairmont. And they'd edited it, cut it, rearranged it. In the real moment, Noah had spoken quietly and with dignity. In the video, through the magic of editing, he loomed over Victoria Ashford, and his quiet words were cut into aggressive fragments, and someone had added a caption: "Unhinged waiter threatens billionaire philanthropist at charity dinner." The word charity was a nice touch. The dinner had been an investor event, but charity made her the victim and him the monster. It had 400,000 views. It had been posted 11 hours ago. "Dad, why does it say those things about you?" Emma's eyes were huge. "That's not what you're like. You'd never. Why are people saying you did that?" Noah sat down next to her and gently took the tablet out of her hands and turned it face down. "Emma, look at me. I need you to hear something, and I need you to really believe it, okay?" She nodded, scared. "Some people," Noah said, "when they can't win a fight, honestly, they lie. And when they have a lot of money, they can make their lies very loud. That video is a lie. Somebody chopped up a real thing that happened and rearranged it to make me look bad. I didn't do what that video says I did. You know me. You've known me your whole life. Do you believe I'd loom over a woman and scream at her?" "No," Emma whispered. "Then that's your answer. Not what 400,000 strangers on the internet believe. What you know in here." He touched her chest over her heart. "About who your father is. That's the only vote that counts. You understand?" She nodded slowly, but her chin was trembling, and Noah understood something in that moment that made him angrier than the video, angrier than the firing, angrier than the phone call. They weren't just coming for him. They knew he could take it. They were coming for him through her. They'd done the math and figured out that the fastest way to break a man like Noah Carter wasn't to threaten his life or his money. It was to make his 10-year-old daughter cry over her cereal. That was the moment Noah stopped thinking about this as a matter of doing the right thing. That was the moment it became personal. He walked Emma to school. He told her and made her promise that if anyone said anything to her about the video, she was to walk away and go straight to a teacher and call him. She promised. He watched her go through the doors, smaller than she'd been yesterday somehow, and he stood at that fence and made a promise of his own silently to Sarah wherever she was. "Nobody makes our daughter cry. Nobody. I don't care who they are." By the time he got home, there were 2 more videos. By noon, there was an article, a real one, in a real business publication. The kind people take seriously. Headlined, "The Bitter Ghost of Meridian. Inside one man's 15-year grudge against Ashford Technologies." It painted him as a failed founder, eaten alive by resentment, a man who'd sold his company fair and square, and then spent 15 years telling himself a story about being robbed. It quoted sources close to the situation. It mentioned in a tone of great sympathy that he was a single father who'd recently lost his job in food service. There are questions the article mused about his stability. They were building it, brick by brick, the narrative. The unhinged, unstable, resentful man who couldn't accept his own failures and had fixated on a successful woman. And it was good. It was professionally done. Noah read it and felt a grudging, sick admiration for how good it was, because whoever wrote it knew exactly which threads to pull, and by the time you finished reading it, you didn't hate Noah Carter. That was the trick. You pitied him. And pity was so much harder to fight than hate. His phone rang. Priya. "You've seen it," she said. "No, hello. I've seen all of it. They're just getting started, Noah. I know how this plays. First they make you crazy, then they make you dangerous. Then when the launch happens and it fails, they'll have already established that you were an unstable man, making wild accusations, so nobody connects the failure to your warning. You become the boy who cried wolf, except they built the boy and they wrote the crying." Her voice was tight and fast. "You need to move faster than they can build the story. You need to get the truth out before the narrative sets like concrete." "I know. There's something else." She hesitated. "I've been reaching out to old Meridian people, quietly, trying to find anyone who remembers you as chief architect, who can corroborate that the technology was yours. And Noah, people are scared. 2 of them hung up on me. One guy, Marcus Chen, remember him? He said..." She stopped. "He said what?" "He said he got a call from someone at Ashford, reminding him about a non-compete he signed years ago, reminding him that his current employer does a lot of business with Ashford Technologies. He didn't say it in words exactly, but the message was clear. Anybody who backs you up, they lose everything. She's building a wall around you, Noah. She's making sure that when you finally stand up and tell the truth, you'll be standing there alone with no one behind you, looking exactly as unstable as the articles say you are." Noah was quiet. "Noah, you still there?" "How's Daniel?" he asked suddenly. The silence on the line changed quality. "What?" "Daniel, Okafor, my co-founder. Do you know where he is?" Priya let out a slow breath. "Noah, I heard he dropped off the map. After Meridian sold, he took it hard. He didn't have your reasons. He thought you 2 should have held on. And when you sold it, broke something between you, and then the company got flipped, and the tech ended up at Ashford, and I think it broke him. Somebody told me he was up in the mountains somewhere, off-grid. Doesn't talk to anybody from the old days. Why? Because," Noah said slowly, "Daniel was the other name on that patent. Daniel understood the concurrency cap as well as I did. Better in some ways, he's the one who ran the stress tests that proved it. If I stand up alone, I'm a bitter ex-waiter with a grudge. If Daniel Okafor stands up next to me, co-founder to co-founder, and we both point at the same broken machine." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. "Noah, he hasn't spoken to you in 15 years. He blames you for selling. You really think he's going to come down off a mountain to help you?" "I don't know," Noah said. "But I know Daniel. And I know that whatever he thinks of me, he loved that machine more than either of us loved anything. And I don't think he can stand the idea of watching Victoria Ashford break it and hurt people with it and get away with it. I think that might be the one thing left in this world that can get Daniel Okafor down off his mountain." He was already reaching for his coat. "I need to find him." "Noah, the launch is in 5 weeks. You don't have time to go chasing a ghost." "I don't have time not to," Noah said. "Priya, text me anything you can find. Last known location, anything. And Priya..." He paused. "Be careful. If they came after Marcus, they know about you. Don't be a hero. If it gets bad, you walk away. This is my fight. You've already done more than I had any right to ask." "Yeah, well..." He could hear the shaky smile in her voice. "Somebody's got to make sure the one honest man in this whole mess doesn't get flattened. Go find Daniel. I'll dig." He hung up. And that was when he heard it, the knock at the door. Not a normal knock. 3 sharp raps, evenly spaced, the kind of knock that belongs to people who have knocked on a lot of doors and expected them to open. Noah looked through the peephole. 2 men in good suits stood in the hallway. Not police. Something quieter and more expensive than police. He opened the door on the chain. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Carter." The taller one held up a card. Some kind of corporate security firm, a name Noah didn't recognize, all sharp angles and reassuring blue. "We're here on behalf of Ashford Technologies. We were hoping to have a brief friendly conversation. May we come in? No, Noah said. You may not come in. My daughter's things are in there, and I don't let strangers into my home. We can talk right here. The two men exchanged a look. The taller one smiled. Of course, we understand. Mr. Carter, we're just going to be direct with you because we respect your time. Ms. Ashford is a reasonable person. The situation between you has gotten heated. Regrettable things have been said on both sides. She'd like to de-escalate. But she needs to know that you're willing to be reasonable too. The email you sent, the documents you're circulating, these are the kinds of things that in the wrong light could be seen as extortion, as a threat against a public company. And that's a serious matter. Federal, potentially. Is that so? It is. Now. The man's voice stayed friendly, and that was the worst part. The relentless warmth of it. Nobody wants it to go there. So here's what we're proposing. You give us the documents. All copies. You sign a simple statement saying you have no ongoing claims. And all of this, the video situation, the article situation, all of it, it just goes away. Quietly. You get your life back. You get to focus on your little girl instead of on a fight you cannot possibly win. He tilted his head. Doesn't that sound better than the alternative? Noah looked at the two men through the 6 inches the chain allowed. He looked at their good suits and their good haircuts and their friendly, relentless, empty smiles. And he understood that Victoria Ashford had escalated again. First money. Then media. Now this men at his door, the word federal. The specter of the whole machinery of power, turned against a single father in a 2-bedroom apartment. She was throwing everything at him. Everything. And it occurred to Noah standing there that you don't throw everything at a man you think is bluffing. You throw everything at a man you're genuinely afraid of. That thought made him smile. And the two men saw the smile, and something in their easy confidence flickered just slightly. I want to make sure I understand, Noah said. You came to my home where my 10-year-old daughter sleeps, to tell me that if I don't hand over proof that your company built a defective product that's going to hurt people, you'll have me charged with a federal crime. Do I have that right? The smile on the taller man's face didn't move. I think that's a very uncharitable way to... I think it's an exactly accurate way to characterize it, Noah said. And I want you to hear something, and I want you to take it back to whoever sent you. I've already been offered $1.2 million to be quiet, and I said no. So you can understand that threats aren't going to work where money didn't. There is nothing you can take from me that I haven't already lost. I buried my wife. You can't threaten a man with anything that scares him less than that. He started to close the door. Now get away from my home. And the next time you come to a place where my daughter sleeps, you'd better bring a warrant, because that's the only piece of paper I'm ever going to accept from Victoria Ashford again. He shut the door. He heard them stand there a moment. Then he heard their footsteps go down the hall. He leaned his back against the door and slid down until he was sitting on the floor of his own entryway, and he put his head in his hands, and for about 30 seconds, Noah Carter let himself be terrified. Because he was terrified. Of course he was. He wasn't a fool. He knew exactly what he was up against now, not a woman's wounded pride, but the full weight of an empire. Money and lawyers and private security and media all pointed at his life like a gun. And he was one man. One unemployed waiter with a legal pad and a 15-year-old patent and a daughter he loved more than his own life. But then he thought about Emma. About her chin trembling over the tablet. About the fact that these people had made his little girl cry to gain leverage over him. And the terror burned off like fog in the sun, and what was left underneath it was something harder and colder and far more useful than fear. Resolve. He got up off the floor. He went to the closet, took down the plastic bin, and took everything out of it, every document, every photograph, every piece of proof. He photographed all of it, backed it up to 3 separate encrypted cloud accounts, and mailed physical copies to 2 people he trusted. If they wanted the documents, they'd have to burn down half the internet to get them all. Then he sat down and wrote out on a piece of paper a plan. A real one. Because he understood now that emailing the general counsel and asking nicely had been naive. These people didn't respond to reason or evidence delivered privately where they could bury it. The only thing that could beat Victoria Ashford was the one thing she couldn't control: an audience. A room full of witnesses too large to intimidate and too public to buy. He needed to say all of this out loud in front of the world at a moment when she couldn't cut the feed or edit the tape or spin the story. And there was exactly one place, one day on the entire calendar where that was possible. The Ashford Technologies Annual Global Conference, where she would unveil the new platform to hundreds of executives and investors and press, where the whole industry would be watching, where Victoria Ashford would stand on a stage in the spotlight at the peak of her power and tell the world that her machine was a triumph. That was where he'd be waiting. 5 weeks. He circled the date. And then he heard Emma's key in the door. She was home from school, and he swept the papers into a drawer and stood up and put on the face. The dad face, the everything's fine face, just in time for her to come through the door and drop her backpack and say, "Dad, can we make spaghetti tonight? The kind with the meatballs." "We can absolutely make spaghetti with the meatballs," Noah said. And they did. And that night, standing at the stove next to his daughter, while she stirred the sauce and told him a long, winding story about the science fair, Noah made a decision that he knew was going to make everything harder before it made anything easier. He was going to find Daniel Okafor, because 5 weeks was not much time, and he could not win this alone. And there was exactly one other person on Earth who understood the machine the way he did, and who might hate what Victoria Ashford was about to do, enough to come down off a mountain and stand next to a man he hadn't spoken to in 15 years. The next morning after he dropped Emma at school, Noah didn't go home. He got in his old Corolla, the one with 200,000 miles on it, and he pointed it east toward the mountains, toward a ghost with a printout of a 15-year-old address that Priya had dug up at 3 in the morning and a note attached that just said, "Last known, no promises, please be careful." He drove. The city fell away, and the suburbs fell away, and the highway climbed into the foothills, and then the mountains, tall and cold and indifferent, and the higher he went, the worse the roads got, until he was on a gravel track that his GPS had given up on entirely, following handwritten directions and instinct and the fading light. And then, at the end of a road that barely deserved the name in a clearing halfway up a mountain, he found a small cabin with smoke coming out of the chimney and a truck out front older than his own. And standing on the porch, having heard the car long before it arrived, holding a rifle down at his side, not raised but not put away. Either was a man Noah hadn't seen in 15 years. Daniel Okafor was heavier than he'd been, and grayer, and his face was weathered by wind and altitude and something harder than either. But it was him. Unmistakably him. And when Noah got out of the car and stood there in the cold clearing, with his hands loose at his sides, Daniel looked at him for a long, long moment across 15 years of silence. And then Daniel Okafor said the first words he'd spoken to Noah Carter since the day the company sold. "You've got about 10 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't get back in my house and pretend I never saw you." And Noah, 41 years old, unemployed, hunted, terrified, and more certain than he'd ever been of anything in his life, looked his old friend in the eye and said, "Because Victoria Ashford is about to break the machine we built, and you're the only person left who can help me stop her. And I think you already know that, Daniel. I think that's the only reason you haven't gone back inside yet." The rifle didn't come up, but it didn't go down either, and the two men stood there in the cold 15 years, and one broken friendship, and one stolen empire between them, while the light died over the mountains, and the first star came out, and neither one of them moved. They stood like that for what felt like a full minute, and then Daniel finally lowered the rifle the rest of the way and said, "You drove 4 hours up a mountain to tell me the sky is falling. I drove 4 hours up a mountain because you're the only person alive who'll know I'm telling the truth." Daniel studied him. "You look terrible, Noah." "I feel worse." "Good." Daniel turned and walked back toward the cabin. He didn't invite Noah in, but he didn't close the door behind him either, and after a moment, Noah understood that the unclosed door was the invitation, and he followed. Inside it was warm and spare and clean. A wood stove. Books, hundreds of them, stacked on shelves and floors. And on one wall, Noah stopped cold because there was a whiteboard. An actual whiteboard up here in the middle of nowhere, covered in equations and flowcharts in Daniel's cramped, furious handwriting. 15 years off the grid, and the man was still doing the work. Still thinking about systems and flows and the movement of things across a network. You didn't stop being what you were. You just stopped letting anyone see it. You never quit, Noah said quietly. I quit people, Daniel said. I never quit the work. Sit down. You want coffee? It's on the stove. I'm not pouring it for you. He dropped into a worn armchair and looked at Noah with those same sharp eyes that used to cut through a bad line of code in half a second. Talk. And don't waste my time with the parts I already know. I know she bought the tech. I know you sold. I've spent 15 years knowing exactly how we got here. Tell me the part I don't know. So Noah told him. He told him about the dinner and the firing and the video and the men at his door. And then he pulled out his phone and he showed Daniel the specs Priya had sent. And he watched his old friend's face as 15 years fell off it in about 90 seconds. Daniel scrolled. His jaw tightened. He scrolled more. And then he stopped and his finger hovered over the screen and he said very softly, "They took out the cap. They took out the cap. They took out the cap." Daniel looked up and his eyes had gone hard and bright. I ran 40 stress tests on that thing, Noah. 40. I have the data. I still have the data. It's in a box in that closet. I proved past 120,000 concurrent reroutes. The whole system starts consuming itself. I proved it. That's why we put the hard ceiling in. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a load-bearing wall. And these people knocked out a load-bearing wall to make a demo look pretty. He stood up, agitated now, pacing the small room. Do they have any idea what they're standing on top of? Do they have any idea how many things break when that engine goes down? That's not a website crashing, Noah. That's freight. That's medicine. That's... I know. When's the launch? 5 weeks. Global. Half the Fortune 500 migrating their supply chains onto it. Daniel stopped pacing. He stood very still. And when he spoke again, his voice had changed quieter and far more dangerous. She's going to kill people, not on purpose. But she's going to stand on a stage and tell the world it works, and people are going to trust her. And the first time the real world leans on that machine, it's going to fold, and the people who get hurt won't be her. It never is. He turned to Noah. And you want to stop her. I want to stop her. With what, a patent from 15 years ago and a legal pad? Daniel almost laughed. Noah, I've been off this mountain exactly 4 times in a decade. I don't have a job they can take. I don't have a reputation they can burn. I've got nothing they can touch, which is exactly why I've been up here. Because I figured out a long time ago that the only way to be free of people like Victoria Ashford is to have nothing they want. He shook his head. And now you're asking me to come back down and hand them a target. Give them something to take again. You know what it cost me last time. You watched what it cost me. And there it was, the wound 15 years old, finally out in the open air. Daniel. You sold. Daniel's voice cracked on the word. You sold and you didn't even fight me on it, you just did it. And I get it. Okay, I've had 15 years to get it. Sarah was dying. What was I going to say, hold the line while your wife dies? I couldn't say that. I didn't say that. I let you go. But you have to understand what it did to me, Noah. That machine was the only thing I ever made that mattered. It was going to be the thing they wrote about when we were gone. And I watched it get sold and flipped and handed to some ambitious woman who slapped her name on it and became a billionaire off the back of every all-nighter we ever pulled, and I couldn't do a single thing about it. So I came up here. And I made myself not care. It took years, Noah. Years. And it worked. I finally got to a place where I could go a whole week without thinking about it. He looked at Noah, and his eyes were wet now, and furious about it. And you drove up my mountain and made me care again in about 4 minutes. So no, I don't know if I can do this. Because caring is the thing that almost killed me, and you're standing in my house asking me to do it again. The wood stove popped. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. And Noah Carter looked at his old friend, the man he'd built something beautiful with, the man he'd hurt without meaning, to the man who'd spent 15 years hiding on a mountain because it was the only way he could survive what they'd lost, and he understood that he had no right to ask for what he'd come to ask for. So he didn't ask. Instead, he took out his phone again, and he found a photo, and he set it on the arm of Daniel's chair, face up, and he stepped back. It was a photo of Emma. That's my daughter, Noah said. Emma. She's 10. She's the reason I sold in the end, not just Sarah. When Sarah got sick, I needed the money for her, and then when she was gone and Emma was born and needed the surgery, I needed it again. That machine we built. It didn't make me a billionaire, but it saved my daughter's life. Twice if you count Sarah's treatment. So I don't regret selling it. I'll never regret it. That thing you loved that you think got wasted, it didn't get wasted, Daniel. It bought her. He nodded at the photo. That's what it built. Not Victoria Ashford's empire. Her. Daniel didn't pick up the phone, but he looked at it. For a long time. 3 days ago. Noah went on. She found a video online. Somebody edited footage of me to make me look like a monster. And she saw it, and she cried, and she asked me why strangers were saying terrible things about her dad. His voice was steady, but barely. They're not just coming after me, Daniel. They figured out fast that I can take whatever they throw at me. So now they're coming at me through her, a 10-year-old. That's the move. Make the little girl cry so the father folds. He picked the phone back up gently. I'm not asking you to care about the machine. I know that well ran dry. I'm asking you to care that a woman with $11 billion decided the smartest way to win a fight was to make my daughter cry over breakfast. That's who we're dealing with. That's what she is. And you're the only man on earth who can help me make her stop. The silence in the cabin was enormous. And then Daniel Okafor put his face in his hands, and his shoulders shook once, and when he looked up, his eyes were red, but his jaw was set, and Noah knew before Daniel said a single word, he knew that he had him. I still have the stress test data, Daniel said roughly. All 40 tests. Raw. Time-stamped. Notarized even because we were paranoid back then about IP theft. Remember? We had everything notarized. He stood up. That's not a legal pad, Noah. That's not a 15-year-old grudge. That's 40 independent documented time-stamped proofs that the exact failure their platform is about to have was known, measured, and deliberately engineered around by us. The people who built it, and then deliberately unengineered by them to hit a launch date. He crossed to the closet, pulled out a heavy plastic case, and set it on the table with a thud. You put my data next to your patent, next to their modified specs, and it's not a grudge anymore. It's a paper trail. It's the kind of thing that ends careers and starts investigations. Noah stared at the case. Daniel, do you understand what you're saying? If you come down off this mountain and stand next to me with that data, they'll come for me. I know. Daniel almost smiled. But here's the thing, Noah. I've spent 15 years making sure there was nothing they could take from me. Turns out that doesn't make you safe. It just makes you the most dangerous man they'll ever meet. Same as you. He looked at the photo of Emma still in Noah's hand. You gave up everything you had to save your girl. Least I can do is give up my quiet mountain to make sure she grows up in a world where the Victoria Ashfords of the world don't always win. He held out his hand. For old times. And for your daughter. And because that machine was ours, and I'll be damned if I let that woman break it. Noah shook his hand. And 15 years of silence ended right there in a warm cabin on a cold mountain, with a handshake and a plastic case full of the truth. But there was no time for reunion, and both of them knew it. 5 weeks, Daniel said, already moving, already packing, already the man he'd been before the mountain. That's not much. What's the plan? Because I know you, Noah, and you've got a plan, and I already don't like it. The annual conference, Noah said. Ashford's global launch event. She'll be on stage presenting the platform to hundreds of executives, investors, press. Live. It's the one place she can't cut the feed or bury the story or edit the tape. Too many witnesses. Too public. That's where we do it. Daniel stopped packing. You want to walk into the enemy's own event surrounded by her security, her people, her home turf, and confront her on stage in front of the entire industry. Yes, that's insane. Probably. She'll have you thrown out before you get within 100 feet of that stage. You're the unhinged waiter from the viral video. Remember, security's got your face. You won't get through the front door. And Noah smiled, the first real smile since he'd left Seattle. That's the other reason I need you. Because they've got my face. They don't have yours. Nobody's seen Daniel Okafor in 15 years. You're a ghost. You could walk into that conference as anybody, and nobody would blink. He paused. And there's one more thing. Priya's been working on the guest list. Who's Priya? The engineer who blew the whistle. The one who got walked out of the building for warning them. She still has friends inside, and she thinks she can get us credentials, real ones, in somebody else's name. Noah's smile faded into something more serious. It's going to be tight. It's going to be dangerous. And if it goes wrong, we don't just lose, we hand them the perfect ending to their story. The unstable ex-founder and his crazy accomplice crashing a corporate event, proving everything the articles said. If we get up there, and we can't make the proof land in the first 2 minutes before security drags us off, we lose everything. Emma sees her dad on the news as a lunatic. You lose your mountain for nothing. Everything rides on those first 2 minutes. Daniel was quiet. Then he zipped the plastic case shut and picked it up. Then we'd better make sure the proof lands in the first 30 seconds, he said. Let's go to work. They drove back down the mountain that night, 2 men and a case full of evidence, headlights carving through the dark, and somewhere below them, the city waited. And in a glass tower in that city, Victoria Ashford was at that very moment being handed a report by Diane Foss that made her set down her drink very slowly. He went to the mountains, Foss said. Our people lost him on the gravel roads too remote to follow without being seen. But there's only one thing up there, Victoria. One person. Victoria's face didn't change, but her knuckles went white around the glass. Okafor. The co-founder. The other name on the patent. If Carter has him, if the two of them come at us together, then it stops being one man's grudge. Victoria finished the sentence quietly. She set the glass down. It becomes 2 founders and a documented technical case. She was silent for a long moment, staring out the window at the city lights 40 floors below. And then she said something that made Diane Foss go cold. How much do we know about the daughter's school? Foss hesitated. Victoria. I asked a question. I don't think that's a road we want to go down. There are lines legally that... I'm not talking about the child. Victoria turned. Her voice was perfectly calm, and that was the terrifying thing about her, that she could say the coldest things in the world in the warmest voice. I'm talking about pressure. A man like Carter has a weak point, and it isn't money, and it isn't threats. It's her. Everything he's doing for her. So we make it very clear, very legally, very deniably, that continuing this fight has consequences for the stability of her life. Custody questions. A father's fitness. An unemployed man publicly unstable dragging his child into a war with a public company. She smiled thin and cold. We don't touch the girl. We just make Noah Carter understand that if he keeps pulling on this thread, the whole fabric of his daughter's life could come apart. And I think, Diane, that a father who gave up a fortune to save that girl's life will give up a fight to keep it stable. Foss stared at her boss. And if he doesn't, he will. But if he doesn't, Victoria picked her glass back up. Then we'll have learned something important about what kind of man we're dealing with, and we'll adjust. She took a sip. Set up the launch security, full facial recognition at every entrance. If Noah Carter comes within a block of my conference, I want to know about it before he finishes parking. And Diane. She turned back to the window. Find out everything about Daniel Okafor. 15 years off the grid means 15 years of secrets. Everyone has a pressure point. Find his. Down in the city. Noah's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He read it at a red light and his blood went cold. It was a photograph of Emma. Walking out of her school that afternoon, backpack on, laughing at something completely unaware. And below the photo, 3 words. Beautiful girl. Careful. Noah's hands tightened on the wheel until they ached. What is it? Daniel said. You just went gray. What? Noah didn't answer for a second. He couldn't. The rage in his chest was so total, so complete that he didn't trust himself to speak. Someone had followed his daughter. Someone had stood close enough to his 10-year-old to take her picture and then sent it to him as a warning, as a leash, as a way of saying, we can reach her whenever we want. He handed Daniel the phone. Daniel looked at it, and his face, which had softened over the course of the day, hardened back into something Noah recognized from the old days. The look Daniel got right before he solved an impossible problem. The look of a man deciding that something would not be allowed to stand. "Okay," Daniel said quietly, setting the phone down. "So that's who she is." "That's who she is. She just made a mistake." Daniel looked out the windshield at the dark road ahead. You know what her mistake was. She thinks that photo makes you weaker. She thinks she just found your leash." He turned to Noah. "But I've known you 20 years, Noah Carter, and I know exactly what that photo just did. It didn't make you weaker. It burned away the last thing holding you back. This morning, part of you still wanted to do this quietly, cleanly. Give her a chance to fix the machine and walk away. That part's gone now, isn't it?" Noah stared straight ahead. The light turned green. He didn't move for a second. Then he pressed the gas. "Yeah," he said. "That part's gone." He drove straight to Emma's after-school program, walked in, signed her out 3 hours early, and held her a little too tightly when she ran to him confused and happy. That night, he made a series of quiet arrangements. He sent Emma to stay with the one person on earth he trusted completely, his late wife's sister Carol, who lived 2 hours south in a small town where nobody knew the name Carter and nobody was watching any schools. He told Emma it was a special vacation with Aunt Carol. Emma, who was 10 and sharp and knew something was wrong, but knew her father even better, looked at him for a long moment and then said, "Dad, are you in trouble?" And Noah, who never lied to her about the big things, knelt down and said, "I'm in a fight, sweetheart, with someone who has a lot of money and thinks that makes her more important than everybody else. Remember what we talked about Marcus and the man whose name is on the hospital?" "You're being Marcus," Emma said slowly. "I'm being Marcus, and Marcus is going to win. But while I'm fighting, I need you to be safe with Aunt Carol, and I need you to not look at the internet, and I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Emma threw her arms around his neck. "You're going to win because you're right," she said into his shoulder, with the total unshakable certainty of a child who has never once had a reason to doubt her father. "And because you're the best dad in the whole world." Noah held her and closed his eyes and did not cry, though it cost him everything he had. With Emma safe, something changed in him. The fear that had been riding him since the men came to his door, the fear of what they might do to her, had a way out now, a place to put it, and without it, he was faster and clearer and more relentless than he'd been in 15 years. The next 3 weeks became a blur of work. Noah and Daniel set up in a cheap rented apartment across town, blinds drawn, working 18-hour days. They built the case piece by piece. Daniel's 40 stress tests, Noah's patent and original design documents, the modified specs. Priya taking enormous risks. Fed them internal communications, not stolen exactly, but forwarded from a righteous distance that showed the concurrency cap had been removed knowingly over the documented objections of at least 2 engineers on a direct timeline pressure from the executive suite. There was even an email buried deep from a mid-level engineer that said in words that would look devastating on a giant screen at a conference, "I wanted on record that I flagged this and was overruled. When it fails, and it will fail, I don't want my name on the decision." That engineer, it turned out, had a name, and that name was one Priya knew, and Priya, God bless her, reached out to that engineer quietly, one honest person to another, and asked a single question. "If 2 founders stood up with proof, would you stand up too?" The answer came back 3 days later. One word: yes. Noah read that text and put his head down on the table and felt for the first time that they might actually win. Because that was the thing Victoria Ashford didn't understand, the thing people like her never understood. She thought she'd built a wall around Noah. She thought she'd isolated him, made him a lone, crazy man with a grudge. But every honest person she'd bullied, every engineer she'd overruled, every whistleblower she'd walked out of the building, she'd made an enemy. She'd been so busy silencing people one at a time that she never noticed they were all quietly finding each other. And now they were standing behind Noah Carter, one by one in the dark where she couldn't see them. She thought he was alone. He had never been less alone in his life. 2 weeks out from the Priya delivered the credentials. 2 press badges, real in the names of a small trade publication that had gone out of business, but whose registration was still valid in the conference system. It was thin. It might not hold up to close scrutiny, but it might get them in the door. 10 days out. Daniel finished the technical presentation, 40 slides that walked the entire failure chain from the original design to the deliberate removal of the cap, to the exact mathematical point at which the platform would collapse, projected onto a screen, so any engineer in that room would understand it in seconds, and no PR spin could survive it. 7 days out, everything nearly fell apart. Noah got a call from Carol, his sister-in-law, and her voice was shaking. "Noah, there was a man outside the house. Emma saw him from her window. She said he was just standing across the street looking at the house, and when I went out, he got in a car and drove off. Noah, they found us. I don't know how, but they found us." Noah's whole world tilted. They'd found Emma. Even 2 hours away, even with everything he'd done, they'd found her. I was in his car within 90 seconds. Daniel grabbed his arm. Noah, stop. Think. This is what she wants. She wants you to panic and run and forget the conference. If you go tearing down there, you might lead more of them right to her, and you blow up 3 weeks of work 7 days before the finish line. Think. That's my daughter, Daniel. I know. And I'm telling you, the best thing you can do for your daughter right now is win. You go move her again somewhere, even I don't know, somewhere off any record. But you do it smart, and then you come back and we finish this. Because the only thing that actually makes her safe, the only thing, is Victoria Ashford being too destroyed to care about a 10-year-old ever again. That's the finish line. Don't lose it 7 days out. Noah sat in the car engine running, torn in half. Every cell in his body screamed to drive to Emma. And Daniel's hand stayed on his arm steady, and Daniel's voice stayed calm, and slowly the animal panic receded, and the strategist came back. I didn't drive to Carol's. Instead, he made 3 phone calls, and by that night, Emma had been moved again quietly, carefully, to a place arranged through a friend of a friend, a cabin with no connection to anyone in Noah's life, under a name that appeared on no record. He didn't even tell Daniel where. The only people who knew were Noah and the trusted friend who'd arranged it. If Victoria couldn't find out from anyone, she couldn't find Emma at all. He talked to his daughter on a burner phone that night. She was scared he could hear it, but she was also, and this undid him, trying to be brave for him. "I'm okay, Dad. Aunt Carol says the new place has a lake. I saw a deer. Are you almost done being Marcus?" "Almost, sweetheart. A few more days. And then I'm coming to get you, and we're going to get ice cream, and this is all going to be over. I promise." "You never break a promise." "I never break a promise." He hung up, and he looked at Daniel across the little apartment, full of the evidence that was going to end Victoria Ashford, and he said in a voice that had gone very quiet and very cold, 7 days. Let's make sure that when we stand up on that stage, we don't just beat her. We make sure she can never touch my daughter again." Daniel nodded slowly. "There's something you should know. I've been digging into her the way she's been digging into us. And I found something. About the platform. About why she can't delay the launch even though she knows it's broken." He turned his laptop around. "Noah, she's not just launching a product. She bet the whole company on it. She took on massive debt, leveraged everything, promised the board and the investors a launch date she cannot move without triggering a default. If that launch slips even a quarter, the financing collapses and Ashford Technologies goes into a death spiral. That's why she can't fix the machine. That's why she's throwing everything at silencing us instead of just delaying and doing it right. She literally can't afford to be right. She's trapped. She has to launch a machine she knows will fail, because the only thing worse than it failing later is it not launching now." Noah stared at the screen. And for the first time, he understood the full shape of the thing. Victoria Ashford wasn't a villain twirling a mustache. She was a woman who'd gambled everything, gotten trapped, and was now willing to hurt anyone. An engineer, a whistleblower, a waiter, a 10-year-old girl, rather than admit she'd lost. "She's cornered," Noah said softly. "Completely. A cornered animal is the most dangerous kind there is." "Yeah," Daniel said. "So whatever she's done to us so far, the videos, the lawyers, the men at your door, the photo of Emma. Understand that none of that was her at full strength. That was her being careful. We've got 6 days left, And the closer we get to that stage, the more desperate she gets, and the less careful she's going to be. He closed the laptop. It's going to get worse before it's over, Noah. A lot worse. She's got 1 week left to stop us by any means necessary, and everything she owns is riding on it. Noah looked at the wall where they'd pinned the whole case, the patent, the tests, the emails, the specs, the entire architecture of the truth. And in the center of it, he'd pinned one more thing. A photo of Emma laughing from before any of this started. Let her come, he said. Let her spend everything she's got. Because in 6 days, she's going to stand on a stage in front of the whole world and tell them her machine works. And when she does, he touched the edge of Emma's photo. I'm going to be in that room, and I'm going to make sure that's the last lie Victoria Ashford ever gets to tell. The 6 days went fast, and each one brought a new attack exactly as Daniel had predicted. On day 5, the defamation lawsuit landed a real one. This time filed in court, $12 million, alleging that Noah Carter had engaged in a coordinated campaign of extortion and reputational harm against Victoria Ashford and Ashford Technologies. It was a nuisance suit designed to bury him in legal fees and paperwork to make him spend the last week before the conference finding a lawyer instead of building his case. Noah read the filing and set it aside without flinching. She's using the courts as a clock, he told Daniel. Trying to run out the time. Ignore it. We're not defending ourselves in a courtroom. We're doing it on a stage in 6 days in front of the whole world. On day 4 they got to Priya. She called Noah and her voice was hollow. They found the credentials, the press badges. Someone flagged them in the conference system. The trade publication came up as defunct, and now security's doing a full audit of every press pass. Noah, they invalidated them. Both of them. You're not getting in the front door on those badges. And, her voice broke, they traced them back to my access. I'm done. Whatever was left of my career, it's gone. They know it was me. Noah closed his eyes. 4 days out, and their way in had just evaporated. Priya, listen to me. Listen. You didn't do this for nothing. Do you hear me? You lit the match. Everything that's about to happen happens because you had the courage to make one phone call to a waiter you used to work with. Whatever it cost you, it was not for nothing. I need you to believe that. How are you going to get in now? I don't know yet, Noah said honestly. But we've come too far. We'll find a way. There's always a way. He hung up and turned to Daniel, and for the first time something like despair flickered in his chest. Badges are dead. Security's on full alert. Facial recognition on every door with my face in it. We've got 4 days no way in, and the whole industry about to watch her lie. He sat down heavily. Tell me you've got something. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. And then he said, there's one door they can't watch, and it's the one that's been standing open the whole time. What are you talking about? Me? Daniel leaned forward. Noah, think about it. They've got your face. They've built a whole story around you, the unhinged waiter, the bitter ex-founder. Your name is poison. But Daniel Okafor, I've been a ghost for 15 years. There's no viral video of me. No article. As far as that conference security knows, I don't exist. And here's the thing. He pulled up something on his laptop. Ashford's conference has a technical track. Breakout sessions. And 2 weeks ago, before all this, they put out a last-minute call for a replacement speaker on a panel about, and I quote, scaling distributed logistics systems for global deployment. A speaker dropped out. They're still short. And I have spent 15 years on a mountain becoming quietly one of the world's foremost experts on exactly that subject. I've got publications under a pen name. Real ones. Cited ones. He looked up. I can get invited in through the front door, as a speaker. As a legitimate expert on the very thing her platform is supposed to do. They'll roll out the red carpet for me. And once I'm in with real credentials in the building, Noah stared at him. You'd be inside their event legitimately with a speaking slot, with access to the technical infrastructure, the AV systems, the presentation network. Daniel's eyes were bright. Noah, if I'm a scheduled speaker, I have a reason to be backstage. A reason to touch the systems. A reason to be exactly where we need to be when she takes that main stage. He sat back. It's thin. It's risky. If anyone connects Daniel Okafor to Noah Carter, it's over. But they're not looking for me. They're looking for you. And nobody looks for a ghost. Noah felt the despair burn off, replaced by that cold, clean clarity. Then we split the plan. You go in the front, legitimate as a speaker. You get access to the systems and the stage. I find another way in through you once you're inside. And when she stands up to tell the world the machine works. We put the truth on every screen in that building at the same time, Daniel finished. Before security can move, before she can cut the feed. All 40 slides, the whole failure chain on the main screen in front of every investor and every reporter in the room. He smiled grimly. She can throw a waiter out of her conference. Let's see her explain why she's throwing out a distinguished technical speaker and the truth at the same time. They spent the next 3 days rebuilding the entire plan around Daniel's access. Daniel submitted his credentials under his pen name, and within a day got an enthusiastic acceptance. The conference was thrilled to have such a respected voice fill the empty slot. Nobody made the connection. Why would they? The pen name had 15 years of clean history and no link to a man who'd vanished off the grid. On day 2, Victoria made her final, most vicious move. It came as a certified letter, hand-delivered to the rented apartment, which meant they'd found where Noah was staying, which meant nothing was safe. Noah opened it with Daniel watching. It was from a family law attorney. It was in careful, deniable legal language, the opening of a petition to question Noah Carter's fitness as a parent, citing his unemployment, his public instability as documented in numerous media reports, his erratic behavior, and his decision to remove his minor child from her established home and school and conceal her whereabouts. It requested a welfare investigation. It suggested that the child might be better served by a stable environment, while these serious questions were resolved. Noah's hands went cold. This was it. This was the thing Victoria had understood from the very beginning, the one weapon that could actually reach him. Not his money, not his safety, not his reputation. His daughter. The threat that if he didn't stop, she'd use the machinery of the courts to take Emma away from him, to declare him unfit to put his child in the hands of the state or of strangers, while lawyers with unlimited money dragged it out for years. He sat down slowly, and for a long moment the fight went out of him. Because this was different. This wasn't a threat to him. This was a threat to the one thing he'd given up everything to protect. And a small, terrified human voice inside him said, "Stop. Just stop. Sign whatever they want. Give them the documents. Keep her. She's all that matters. Nothing on that stage matters more than keeping Emma." Fold. He put his head in his hands. And Daniel didn't say anything. He didn't give a speech. He just walked over and set something on the table in front of Noah quietly and stepped back. It was the burner phone. "Call her," Daniel said softly. "Call Emma. Before you decide anything. Just call her, and then decide." Noah looked at the phone for a long time. Then he picked it up and dialed. Emma answered on the second ring. "Dad?" Her voice was bright alive, completely unafraid, because she didn't know. She didn't know any of it. The lawsuit or the letter or the men or the threat hanging over her whole life. "Dad, guess Aunt Carol taught me to skip rocks, and I got one to go 4 times. 4. And there's this dog next door named Biscuit, and he likes me the best." Noah closed his eyes. 4 times, huh? That's amazing, sweetheart. When are you coming? You said a few more days. Is it a few more days yet? It's a few more days, Noah said. Emma, can I ask you something? Yeah. You remember what I told you about Marcus and the man whose name is on the hospital? About how nobody's more important than anybody else, no matter how much money they have. Yeah, I told Bailey Krause. She got mad. A pause. Dad, is that what your fight is about? Is the money person trying to act like she's more important than everybody? And there it was. Out of the mouth of a 10-year-old, the whole thing distilled. Noah opened his eyes. Yeah, baby, he said quietly. That's exactly what it's about. Then you have to win, Emma said with that total, unshakable certainty. Because if she wins, then it means the money person really is more important. And you said that's not true. You said it's the most important thing to know that it's not true. So you can't let her win, Dad. Because then everything you told me would be a lie. And you never lie to me about the big stuff. Noah Carter sat in a rented apartment with a letter on the table, threatening to take his daughter away and his 10-year-old daughter 2 hours away, and safe and unafraid had just handed him back his own spine. "No," he said, and his voice was steady again, steadier than it had been in weeks. "I never lie to you about the big stuff, and you're right, I can't let her win, so I'm not going to. Promise. Promise. I'm going to come get you in 3 days, and this is going to be over, and I'm going to have kept my promise. You skip some more rocks for me, okay? I want to hear about it when I see you." "Okay. Love you, Dad. Always more." "Love you more. Always more." He hung up. He looked at the letter on the table, the threat to take Emma, the most sophisticated and vicious weapon Victoria Ashford had deployed yet. And then he picked it up, and very calmly he tore it in half, and then in quarters, and he dropped the pieces in the trash. "She thinks that letter is her checkmate," Noah said, standing up, and something in his face had changed permanently. Some last soft thing had gone hard. "She thinks she finally found the one thing I won't risk. And she's almost right. There's nothing I wouldn't do to keep my daughter." He turned to Daniel. "But she got the logic backwards. She thinks the way to protect Emma is to fold. It's not. The way to protect Emma is to make sure that the woman who's threatening her is finished completely publicly, permanently finished, so that she can never pick up a phone or write a letter or send a man to a school ever again. Folding doesn't protect my daughter. Folding just teaches Victoria Ashford that the threat works and she'll use it forever." He picked up the plastic case of evidence. "The only way to protect Emma is to win. So we win. In 3 days. No matter what it costs." Daniel looked at his old friend, and there was something like awe in his face. "You know, most people you threaten their kid, they break. You just got harder. Because most people," Noah said, "still have things to lose that scare them more than losing their integrity. I lost the thing I was scared of a long time ago in a hospital room holding Sarah's hand. Everything since then has just been a question of whether I was going to raise our daughter to be brave or to be safe." He hefted the case. "I choose brave. Let's go end this." The morning of the conference arrived cold and gray. The Ashford Technologies annual global conference took over the largest convention center in the city, thousands of attendees, hundreds of press, every major player in logistics and tech and finance in one place. All of them there to witness the unveiling of the platform that Victoria Ashford had bet her entire empire on. Security was extraordinary. Facial recognition at every entrance. Private guards at every door. And somewhere in the system, Noah Carter's face was flagged in red. Daniel walked in the front door at 8:40 in the morning, badge around his neck, pen name printed neat and official, a distinguished technical speaker arriving for his panel. The security guard scanned his credentials, smiled, and waved him through. 15 years off the grid, and Daniel Okafor walked into the enemy's fortress like he owned it, because to everyone in that building, he was exactly who his badge said. He was a respected expert, an honored guest. He texted Noah from inside. "I'm in." Nobody blinked. "Working on the AV access now. Keynotes at 11. She takes the main stage at 11 sharp. That's our window." Noah in the Corolla 3 blocks away read the text and let out a breath. "Copy. Get me a way in. I'll be ready." The next 2 hours were the longest of Noah's life. He sat in the car, and he waited, and he watched the clock, and he thought about Emma skipping rocks by a lake 2 hours away, safe waiting for a father who'd promised to come get her when it was over. At 9:50, Daniel texted, "AV booth is a problem. 2 techs always staffed. Can't hijack the main screen from here without them seeing. Need another angle." At 10:15, working it. "There's a service entrance east side loading dock, propped open for catering. No camera on it that I can see. If you can get to it, I can meet you inside and get you a staff jacket. It's thin, but it's what we've got." At 10:30, Noah was moving. The east loading dock was exactly where Daniel said. Catering crews moved in and out, hauling carts and in the chaos of a major event's lunch prep. One more man in motion drew no attention. Noah slipped in behind a cart, and Daniel was there in the shadows past the kitchen, and he pressed a staff jacket and a lanyard into Noah's hands. "Put these on. Head down. We've got 25 minutes. They moved through the back corridors of the convention center. Two men who'd built an empire together 15 years ago, now sneaking through service hallways to tear one down. "The plan's changed," Daniel said fast quiet as they walked. "I can't get the main screen from the booth, but there's a better way." She's doing a live technical demo during the keynote showing the platform running in real time on the big screen, proving how robust it is. It's the centerpiece. And to run that demo, they've got a direct feed from a staging server to the main display. He stopped at a door marked Staging Authorized Personnel. "If I can get onto that staging server, I don't hijack the screen. I let her put our proof up, during her own demo, in front of everyone." Noah stared at him. "You can do that. I built the architecture this whole thing is descended from. I know how these feeds work better than the kids they hired to run it." Daniel's hands were already moving. "But I need time, and I need you to do the thing only you can do. Because putting the technical proof on screen isn't enough, Noah. Engineers will understand it, but half that room is investors and press who'll just see confusing slides. Somebody has to stand up in front of all of them and say it. Say it plain. Say it human. Somebody has to be the face and the voice of the truth while I make the screen show it." He looked up. "That's you. That's always been you. I make the machine tell the truth. You make the people believe it." At 10:55, they were in position. Daniel was jacked into the staging server in a back room, the whole case of evidence loaded and ready, 40 slides queued waiting for the moment. And Noah stood at a side entrance to the main hall, staff jacket on, heart slamming, watching through a gap in the curtains as 3,000 people filled the enormous auditorium and the lights began to dim, and a voice announced the founder and CEO of Ashford Technologies. And Victoria Ashford walked out onto the stage. She was magnificent. There was no other word. She commanded that stage the way she commanded every room in a perfect suit under perfect light, and 3,000 people applauded, and she smiled the smile that had graced 3 magazine covers, and she began to speak about the future, about connection, about a platform that would move the world's goods more efficiently than anything in human history, about trust. She used that word, trust. She said the whole world was about to put its trust in Ashford Technologies, and she said it like she believed it, and maybe Noah thought watching her maybe she'd told the lie so many times she did. At 11:08, she gestured to the enormous screen behind her. "And now," she said, "let me show you, not tell you, show you. A live demonstration of the platform running right now, handling a simulated global load." The screen lit up. The demo began. And in the back room, Daniel Okafor's fingers moved across a keyboard, and he looked at the text Noah had sent him 30 seconds earlier. "Do it. Now." And he took a breath, and he prepared to make Victoria Ashford's own machine tell the truth in front of the entire world. And in that exact moment, the door to Daniel's back room opened. A security guard stood in the doorway. Behind him, Diane Foss. And behind her, walking slowly, her heels clicking on the concrete floor, her face utterly calm, was Victoria Ashford's chief of security, and in her hand was a tablet, and on that tablet was a photograph of a man from 15 years ago, younger but unmistakable. "Mr. Okafor," Diane Foss said quietly, "we've been expecting you. Did you really think we wouldn't recognize the one man alive who could actually do this?" She smiled. "Step away from the server. It's over." And on the main stage, 3,000 people watched Victoria Ashford's demo run flawlessly and applauded, while backstage the truth sat trapped. One keystroke away from freedom, and the hands that could set it free were being pulled away from the keys. Daniel didn't step away from the server. He turned his head slowly and looked at Diane Foss, and then he did something that made the security chief hesitate. He smiled. "Expecting me," Daniel said. "That's funny. Because if you were really expecting me, you'd have caught me an hour ago when I walked in the front door with a badge. You didn't figure it out until just now, did you? Somebody ran my speaker photo through the system a little too late." He kept his hands on the keyboard. So here's the thing you need to understand, Ms. Foss. You're about 10 seconds too slow. Step away from the server, the security chief said, moving forward. I already sent it, Daniel said. Everyone froze. It was a bluff. He hadn't sent it. He'd been about to his finger a keystroke away when the door opened. But Diane Foss didn't know that, and the security chief didn't know that. And in the half-second of doubt that crossed their faces, Daniel Okafor brought his finger down on the key. And in the main hall on the enormous screen behind Victoria Ashford, in the middle of her flawless live demonstration, the image stuttered and changed. For 1 second, the demo froze. And then across the screen in letters 6 feet high in front of 3,000 executives and investors and reporters, a single line appeared. This platform will fail. Here's the proof. Victoria Ashford stopped mid-sentence. In the back room, the security chief lunged for Daniel, but Daniel had already stood up and stepped back. Hands raised because his part was done. The server was locked. The sequence was running, and there was nothing anyone in that room could do to stop it now. Go ahead, Daniel said. Pull the plug. It's mirrored to 3 external servers, and it's already streaming to every press outlet credentialed in this building. You can't unsend it. You people never understood that about the truth. Once it's out, it's out. And on the main stage, the slides began to advance. Slide 1. Noah's original patent. His name, and Daniel's on the core routing algorithm, dated 15 years ago. Slide 2. The original design specification, with the concurrency cap circled in red. And beside it, the note in the original engineering documentation, hard sealing required. System failure guaranteed above this threshold. Do not remove. Slide 3. Ashford Technologies modified specification for the new platform with the cap removed. Slide 4. Daniel's 40 stress tests, notarized time-stamped, proving the exact point of catastrophic failure. And then the emails. The internal communications. The engineer's words, 6 feet high. I wanted on record that I flagged this and was overruled. When it fails, and it will fail, I don't want my name on the decision. The auditorium erupted into confused noise. 3,000 people turning to each other, murmuring, then talking, then shouting questions. Reporters were on their feet, phones up recording. And Victoria Ashford stood alone in the center of the stage, in the perfect suit under the perfect light, staring at the screen behind her as 15 years of stolen work and buried lies scrolled past for the entire world to see. And that was the moment Noah Carter walked out onto the stage. He came from the side entrance in his staff jacket, and he walked past the frozen event crew, past the security guards too stunned to move, and he walked to the center of the stage and stood beside Victoria Ashford, and he took the microphone off the podium, and he turned to face 3,000 people. Victoria's head snapped toward him, and for the first time since the dinner at the Fairmont, she looked at Noah Carter's face, and she knew him. Not as a waiter, as the ghost, as the man on the patent, as the thing she'd been running from for weeks without ever quite letting herself believe it was real. You, she breathed. Off mic, but he heard it. Me, Noah said. Security began to move toward him from the wings, and Noah lifted the microphone and spoke fast before they could reach him in a voice that filled the enormous hall. My name is Noah Carter. 2 months ago, I was a waiter. Some of you have seen a video of me, a man losing his temper at a charity dinner threatening this woman. That video was edited. It was a lie. I know some of you believed it, and I don't blame you. It was very well made. Security was closing in. He kept going. But before I was a waiter 15 years ago, I was the co-founder and chief architect of the company that built the technology this entire platform is standing on. My name is on the patent. It's on the screen behind me. And I am here to tell you, as the man who designed the machine at the heart of Ashford Technologies, that the platform, Ms. Ashford, just asked you to trust with your supply chains, with your hospitals, your medicine, your food is going to fail. Not maybe, not possibly. It is going to fail catastrophically the first time the real world puts real pressure on it. And she knows it. She has known it for weeks. And instead of fixing it, she tried to bury the people who told her the truth. A security guard reached him and put a hand on his arm. And Victoria Ashford, to the shock of everyone including Noah, held up her own hand and stopped him. "Wait," she said. The guard hesitated. "Let him finish." Victoria's voice was cold and controlled, and she took her own microphone off the podium, and she turned to face Noah, and 3,000 people went dead silent, because they understood that they were about to watch two people fight to the death in front of the entire world. "By all means, let the waiter finish." She turned her smile on him, and it was the same smile from the Fairmont, the one designed to make a man feel small. "Because I think everyone here deserves to see this for what it is. A bitter, failed man. A man who sold his company 15 years ago, sold it willingly, signed the papers, took the money, and has spent every day since eaten alive by the fact that other people made something of what he threw away. You didn't build this, Mr. Carter. You quit. You walked away. And now you're standing on my stage in a borrowed jacket, trying to steal the credit for something you didn't have the courage to see through." She turned to the audience, playing them, working them, because it was what she did best. "This is a man who couldn't handle his own life and needs to blame someone. And he picked me. It was good. It was devastatingly good." And Noah watched a few faces in the front rows shift, watched the doubt creep in because she was so smooth and so certain, and he was a man in a catering jacket. And then Noah did the thing she never saw coming. He didn't argue about the technology. He didn't defend his credibility. He looked at Victoria Ashford, and he asked her one quiet question into the microphone for everyone to hear. "Ms. Ashford, why did I sell?" Victoria blinked. "What? You said I sold my company 15 years ago. You said I took the money and walked away. And that's true. I did. So I'm asking you, since you've clearly researched me so thoroughly, since you've built your whole case around what a quitter I am, tell these people why I sold. You know, your people dug up everything about me. So tell them, why did a 26-year-old man sell his life's work for a fraction of what it was worth?" Victoria's mouth opened, and nothing came out, because she did know. Diane Foss had put it in a report weeks ago, and Victoria had read it and filed it away as leverage, as a weakness, and had never once let herself sit with what it actually meant. "You don't want to say it," Noah said softly. "So I will." He turned to the audience, and his voice changed. It stopped being an argument and became something else, something true. "I sold my company because my wife was dying. Stage 3 cancer. She needed treatment that insurance wouldn't cover, and the only thing I had in the world worth enough to save her was my stake in the company I'd built. So I sold it. I sold my life's work to try to save the woman I loved." He paused. "It didn't work. She died anyway. Her name was Sarah. And 3 years later, our daughter, the one Ms. Ashford asked about at that dinner, the one she wondered was embarrassed of me. Our daughter was born with a hole in her heart and needed emergency surgery when she was 8 months old, and the money from that same sale is what paid for it. That machine on the screen behind me didn't build an empire, folks. It saved my wife's dignity in her last months, and it saved my daughter's life. That's what I threw away. That's what I quit." The hall was so silent you could hear the hum of the lights. "So no, Ms. Ashford," Noah said, turning back to her. "I'm not a bitter man who can't handle his life. I'm a father who gave up everything he had twice to save the people he loved and never regretted it for one single second. And I'm standing here today for one reason. Not revenge, not credit, not money. I'm here because you built your platform on the thing I sacrificed everything for, and you're about to break it in a way that hurts people, and I am the one man left alive who can prove it and stop you. That's it. That's the whole story." He let it sit. And then he delivered the line he'd been carrying in his chest for weeks. "You called me a waiter at that dinner. You asked if my daughter was ashamed of me." He looked her dead in the eye. "No, Ms. Ashford. I'm a father who refused to sell his conscience, and my daughter has never been prouder of anyone in her life." Something broke in the room. You could feel it, the tide turning all at once, 3,000 people shifting from doubt to belief in a single collective breath. And Victoria Ashford felt it too, felt the room leave her, felt 15 years of control slipping through her fingers, and she did the only thing a cornered animal knows how to do. She attacked. "This is fraud," she said sharp loud to the room. "This is a coordinated criminal act. This man and his accomplice broke into our systems, hijacked our presentation. That's a felony, and every person in this room is a witness to it. Security, remove them. Both of them. Now." The guards moved, and that was when a voice came from the audience. "He's telling the truth." A woman stood up in the third row. Priya. She'd gotten in. Noah didn't know how, would never fully know how, but she'd gotten in, and she stood there with 3,000 people turning to look at her. "My name is Priya Nair. I was a senior systems engineer at Ashford Technologies until 3 weeks ago, when I was walked out of the building by security for flagging exactly what's on that screen. Everything he just said is true. I saw the specs. I raised the concern internally, and I was silenced for it." She looked around the room. "I'm probably going to get sued into the ground for saying this. I don't care, because he's right and I've spent 3 weeks being a coward about it and I'm done." And then another person stood. A man near the back. "I wrote that email," he said. "The engineer. The one whose words were on the screen. I wanted on record that I flagged this and was overruled. That's my email. She's had it buried for 2 months. Everything on that screen is real." And then another, and another. People Noah had never met, engineers and former employees, and honest people who'd been waiting quietly in the dark for someone to stand up first, so they wouldn't have to stand alone. One by one, they rose all across the auditorium, and Victoria Ashford turned in a slow circle on her own stage and watched the wall she'd built around Noah Carter collapse into a room full of witnesses she could not silence, could not sue, could not buy, because there were too many of them, and they were all watching each other be brave. "Stop," Victoria said. Her voice cracked just slightly for the first time. "Stop this. Security." But the security guards had stopped moving, because even they could feel it now. Even they understood that whatever was happening in that room, it was bigger than a job, bigger than a paycheck, and you did not want to be the man who dragged a grieving father off a stage in front of 3,000 people who had just decided he was telling the truth. And in the back room, Diane Foss stood beside a monitor, watching the feed, and she quietly set down her tablet and stepped away from Daniel Okafor, because she was a lawyer, and she could see a sinking ship, and she was not going down with it. Victoria Ashford stood alone at the center of the stage. She looked at the screen behind her, still scrolling the proof. She looked at the standing witnesses. She looked at the reporters, dozens of them all recording all of it going out live to the world. And she looked finally at Noah Carter, the waiter, the ghost, the father, the man she'd asked to smile and pour more wine, and for the first time in her adult life, Victoria Ashford opened her mouth to speak and found that she had nothing to say. For decades, she'd had an answer for everything, a play for every situation, a way to spin, deflect, dominate, win. And now, standing in the wreckage of her own empire in front of the entire industry, she reached for the words that had never once failed her, and they weren't there. There was only silence. Her silence. The silence of a woman who had finally completely run out of lies. She lowered her microphone, and in the enormous echoing quiet of that hall, Victoria Ashford, one of the most powerful people in America, said nothing at all. Noah looked at her for a long moment, and then quietly, off the strength of everything he'd carried, and everything he'd lost, and everything he'd protected, he said the only thing left to say. "You could mock me that night, Ms. Ashford, and you did." He set the microphone down on the podium. "But I told you your company would wish you'd listened." And he walked off the stage. The fallout came fast, the way it always does once a dam breaks. By that evening, the footage was everywhere. Victoria Ashford, standing silent on her own stage as the truth scrolled behind her, had become the most watched clip in the country. By the next morning, Ashford Technologies Board had convened an emergency session, and the launch was frozen, and independent engineers were brought in to verify Daniel's stress tests, and they did every single one of them exactly as he'd said. The platform was pulled. The migration was halted. And the disaster that would have taken down hospitals and pharmacies and food distribution networks across the country. The disaster no one would have connected to Victoria Ashford until it was far too late, simply never happened. It was the strangest kind of heroism, the kind nobody throws a parade for, because you can't celebrate a catastrophe that didn't occur. But Noah knew, Daniel knew, Priya knew, and that was enough. Within a week, Victoria Ashford was removed as CEO. The board facing shareholder lawsuits and a federal inquiry into the buried safety concerns cut her loose with the speed of people trying to survive a fire. The investigation came next into the manipulated media campaign, into the buried engineering reports, into the pressure exerted on witnesses. The defamation suit against Noah evaporated. The family court petition, the vicious letter threatening to take Emma, it vanished quietly, withdrawn because the lawyers who'd filed it understood that it would not survive contact with a courtroom now, and because Victoria Ashford no longer had the power to make anyone do anything. The men who'd followed Emma, who'd photographed her outside her school, who'd stood across the street from Carol's house, they simply stopped. There was no one paying them anymore. There was no empire behind them. The leash Victoria thought she'd found around Noah's neck had never really existed, and now the hand that held it was gone. And Noah Carter drove 2 hours south to a cabin by a lake and knocked on the door, and his daughter came flying out and jumped into his arms. "You won," Emma said into his shoulder. It wasn't a question. She'd known all along. "You kept your promise. You beat the money person." "I kept my promise," Noah said, holding her, breathing her in. "And you know what? You're the one who made me do it. Right at the end, when I wanted to quit, when I almost gave up, you're the one who reminded me who I was. You told me I couldn't let her win, because then everything I taught you would be a lie." He pulled back and looked at her. "You saved me, Emma, not the other way around." "That's what family does," Emma said with the simple certainty of a 10-year-old who'd never known anything else. Noah received a settlement in the end, a substantial one, and lifetime royalties on the technology that had, after everything, finally been legally recognized as his. It was more money than he'd ever imagined having, and everyone assumed he'd go back to corporate America, back to the world of glass towers and board meetings, and the kind of power Victoria Ashford had wielded. Investors called. Recruiters called. Someone even offered him a CEO seat. He turned them all down. Instead, Noah Carter took a piece of that settlement and he opened a small restaurant in Seattle. Nothing fancy. A neighborhood place. Good food, fair prices, the kind of restaurant where the waiters were treated like they mattered because the man who owned it had spent 6 years carrying trays and knew exactly what that felt like. He called it Emma's Table. And on the wall by the door, where every single person who walked in would see it, he hung a simple wooden sign with a single line burned into it. "No one in this room needs permission to be respected." Daniel Okafor came down off his mountain for good. He couldn't fully explain why, except that 15 years of quiet had finally cured him of needing it. And there was something about standing next to Noah on that stage that had woken up the part of him that used to love building things. He became a partner in a new venture, doing the work he was born to do on his own terms, with nothing to prove and no one to answer to. He ate at Emma's table every Sunday. Emma called him Uncle Dan. Priya, who'd stood up in that third row and thrown away what was left of her career to tell the truth, found that the truth had a way of paying its debts. Within a month, 3 companies were competing to hire her because it turned out that in an industry full of people who'd stayed quiet, an engineer who'd stood up in a room of 3,000 and refused to lie was worth more than gold. She took the job she liked best and never looked back, and Victoria Ashford disappeared from public life. Not to prison in the end. The investigations dragged on for years, and the lawyers were expensive, and the outcomes were complicated in the way these things always are for people who once had $11 billion. But her name, which had graced 3 magazine covers, became something else entirely. A cautionary tale. A punchline. The woman who stood silent on her own stage. She was never again introduced in a room as the most powerful person in it. And that, for a woman like Victoria Ashford, was its own kind of prison, a life sentence served in the currency she'd valued above all others, the respect of rooms she was no longer welcome in. Years later, Emma Carter, older now, poised with her father's steady eyes, was working at the restaurant one evening, and a customer, an older man in an expensive coat, watched her move through the room and finally asked, "You're the owner's daughter, aren't you? The one the place is named after?" "I am," Emma said. "I remember your father's story. The whole country did for a while. The waiter who took down the Billionaire." The man shook his head. He could have run any company in America after that. He could have been as rich and powerful as the woman he beat. Why on earth did he open a restaurant? Emma smiled, and she looked over at her father, who was across the room, refilling a stranger's water glass with the same care he'd once poured Victoria Ashford's wine, and she said the truest thing she knew. "My father taught me that dignity is the one thing no billionaire can take from you," Emma said. "He didn't want to become the thing he beat. He wanted to prove you don't have to." She turned back to the customer. "Some people spend their whole lives building empires. My dad spent his building character. And here's the thing about those two, an empire, somebody can always take from you. Somebody can vote you out, or buy you out, or bury you on your own stage in front of the whole world." She picked up a menu and set it in front of him with a smile that was entirely her father's. "But character. That's the one thing you get to keep. That's the one thing that can be inherited. And my father made sure I inherited every bit of it." The man never forgot that answer. And neither did anyone who ever ate at Emma's table, where a single line hung by the door, and a father who'd once been mocked for pouring wine, poured water for strangers with his head held high, having proven once and for all the thing he'd always known, and the world had finally been forced to learn. Some people build empires, and some people build character. Only one of those two things can be taken from you. And Noah Carter had spent his whole life making certain his daughter inherited the one that couldn't.